15th, 2007. We're here in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the Circle Cinema. We're pleased to have this evening Mrs. Harriet Frank, who was a corporal in the Marine Corps during World War II. Mrs. Frank, thank you for joining us this evening, and I'd just like to ask you to tell us your story in your words.
Well, I was a junior in high school at Zapapa High when World War II started. I remember hearing President Roosevelt come on the radio, and we heard about the war. High school, suddenly everybody, they were aware that we were going to be going into war, and we had a lot of activities that we felt like might help. We sold stamps, and the stamps were 10 cents each, and you put them in a book, and when you got enough, you could get a war bond. In the neighborhood, we had a victory garden. We collected the foil off of chewing gum that was on the wrapper. People collected string. They collected anything that might be used for the war. A lot of things were rationed. Shoes were a big thing because eventually we couldn't get shoes, and they used cardboard on the bottom because the military needed the shoes. Sugar was rationed, and meat was rationed, and gasoline was limited, and if anybody had any gasoline for their car, we all piled in the car at the same time. One thing that we did, there was a bus from Tulsa would come and pick up girls from Tulsa and in Zapapa, and usually my parents chaperoned, and we went down to Camp Gruber, and the military, they were at Camp Gruber prior to shipping out, and we go down there for dances. One night we didn't get there late because we had a blowout, and they had trouble finding a tire to put on the bus to get us down to the dance. Let's see, I had an uncle that was on dawn patrol at Pearl Harbor when it was bombed, and fortunately he was able to land and was able to live through the war. And I had a cousin that ferried airplanes. She was a WASP, and the women ferried airplanes across the country, and that freed a man to ferry the plane. Of the things we collect, one day my folks' refrigerator went out, and there were no refrigerators to be had except one store had a refrigerator on the floor, and they managed to talk him into selling it to them so they would have a refrigerator. Everything was limited. After I graduated, went to Oklahoma A&M College, and the dormitories were filled with the military at that time. They were in the reserved officers training. There were men, Army, there were Navy girls on a base, and the Air Force was down at Stillwater. And so I met a lot of the military people. Finally, they would ship out. They were to be officers when they were shipped out. And after my first year in college, couldn't afford to go back. So I went to school at Spartan Aircraft and worked there for a year, and I began to think about going into the Marines, and I found out I had to be 20 before I could join with parents' permission. And my parents didn't want to give me permission, so I told them, well, I'd just wait till I was 21. So they finally realized I was serious, and I signed up and joined the Marines. Went to boot camp at Camp Lejeune and for 6 weeks, and it was quite an experience, and it was very hot when we were there in June. The day we finished and had our final dress parade was 130, I remember, and about half of them passed out because we were used to being out in the sun, but that was just too much. And we shipped up to Washington, D.C., and I was stationed at Henderson Hall in Arlington, Virginia, which was across the road from Marine headquarters. My first job for 3 or 4 months was in a section that inventoried personal effects of Marines that were missing in action or killed in action. We couldn't send any items other than we sent their billfold if they had money. We couldn't send any pictures because the possibility the family didn't know who the people were in the pictures, and nothing, no personal items like that. So if they had, it wasn't much more than their billfold, and they were put in the bag and they were sent home. It was kind of hard to do that for any length of time. There were men and women Marines in that unit. And so after 3 or 4 months, I was transferred to the section that handled dependency discharges because the war was over then. And to back up, I took a typing test, and I had been a typist, had done a lot of typing in college, and when I went to take my test to be in the Marines, my typewriter was broken. And I think that's how they managed to weed out some of the typists, so I became a clerk, but it was really to my advantage because I got to do a variety of jobs there at Marine headquarters. I was in Washington when the war was over, and I remember hearing about it, and we all suddenly got dressed and raced to get downtown in Washington. And the town was just wild. People were everywhere. Everybody was kissing everybody else, and everyone was it was unbelievable. Very quiet people suddenly became very wild. It wasn't, I'm sure there was a lot of drinking. It wasn't that they were just drunk with excitement because the war was over.
Now what was it like? So often we overlook our women veterans. We don't hear very much about. What was it like being a woman in the military during World War II?
Well, it was probably a great deal like women anywhere. There were government girls. There were buildings with just girls that worked in the offices. We had lots more strict. We had to be in at 9 o'clock on weekdays. We could stay out until midnight. On the weekends, we weren't free to come and go. They were a lot more strict on us than people realized. If the girls lived in an apartment in downtown Washington, they were free to come and go as they wanted to, and we couldn't.
So were there different rules for men than the women?
Yeah, I'm sure there were. Yeah, I don't think there were time restrictions on the men, but they were on the women.
You must have felt awful proud to serve.
I was very proud.
Sure.
Our base was across the fence from Arlington Cemetery. And that was really impressive because a lot of times we would walk to town, which was probably 2 miles anyway, rather than take the bus. And we cut through Arlington Cemetery and see the graves of men, and I'm sure there were women too that were buried there. And occasionally we would see a burial with the caissons and the casket. Just look out the window from Marine headquarters and you could see them. So it was, we were real proud. People sometimes did not show us the respect that we felt like we were entitled to, but then again, there would be people that want a picture of women in Marine uniforms, and so it was a very exciting time, and I had a lot of good friends, and we enjoyed it.
That's great. Thank you very much. You did fantastic.
My time up?
Yep.
Oh gosh.
You did great.
What am I going to say now?
No, you did great. You did great.
Okay, for what it's worth, there it is.
Thank you very much.
Well, you want this?
Yes, I do. Thank you.